They didn't just lose you. They made a choice, and the moment they made that choice, they unknowingly set consequences into motion that would follow them long after you were gone. Think about that for a moment, because most people believe that endings happen by accident. They tell themselves stories. They say things like, "It just didn't work out. We drifted apart. Life happened." But sometimes the truth is much harder to face. Sometimes people know exactly what they're doing. They know they're taking you for granted. They know they're ignoring your efforts. They know they're dismissing your loyalty, your patience, your love, your presence, and they continue anyway. Because deep down, they assume something dangerous. They assume you'll stay. No matter how many times they disappoint you, no matter how many promises they break, no matter how invisible they make you feel, they believe your forgiveness has no limit. And that's where the story begins. Not when they hurt you, not when they walked away, not when they stopped appreciating you. The story begins when they convince themselves that losing you was impossible. Because the strange thing about human nature is this: people rarely recognize value while they still possess it. A healthy heart isn't appreciated until illness arrives. Peace isn't appreciated until chaos enters. And a loyal person isn't appreciated until their absence creates a silence nobody else can fill. Tonight, I want to take you somewhere uncomfortable. A place where we'll uncover why some people only understand the weight of their decisions after it's too late. Why the consequences of losing someone genuine often arrive months or even years after the choice was made. And why your departure may have taught lessons your presence never could. Because sometimes the greatest consequence isn't punishment, it's realization. And realization has a way of arriving when there is no longer anything left to save. Part 1. The moment they confused your kindness for permanence. Imagine a person who lives beside the ocean every day. Every morning they hear the waves. Every evening they watch the sunset reflect across the water. At first, the beauty overwhelms them. But eventually, they stop noticing. The ocean becomes background noise, not because the ocean became less beautiful, but because familiarity creates blindness. People often do the same thing with human beings, especially with the people who love them most. Your kindness became normal, your loyalty became expected, your patience became routine, your sacrifices became invisible. The very qualities that made you extraordinary slowly became things they assumed would always exist. Carl Jung once observed that people often remain unconscious of what they possess until circumstances force awareness upon them. And that is exactly what happened. They became unconscious of your value. Not because you lacked value, but because your consistency hid it. Every time you forgave them, they learned they could disappoint you without losing you. Every time you stayed, they learned your presence was guaranteed. Every time you tolerated behavior that hurt you, they interpreted your endurance as permanence. This is one of the cruelest psychological illusions. People mistake access for ownership. They believe that because they can reach you today, they will be able to reach you tomorrow. Because you answered yesterday, you'll answer forever. Because you cared before, you'll care endlessly. But life doesn't work that way. Nothing permanent exists, not opportunities, not relationships, not people. And eventually something changes. Not outside, inside. One day the heart becomes tired. One day the soul stops negotiating. One day the person who kept giving finally understands their own worth. And that's the day everything shifts, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, because true departure begins long before physical absence. It begins when someone realizes they deserve more than being treated like an option. And by the time others notice that shift, the consequences have already begun. Part 2. The silence they never prepared for. What they never imagined was that the silence afterward would become the loudest thing in their life. There is something strange about absence. When someone is constantly present, we often underestimate their impact. A clock ticking in a room goes unnoticed after a while. The hum of electricity disappears into the background. The familiar voice that checks on us, supports us, forgives us, encourages us, eventually becomes part of the environment, and that's exactly why people are shocked when it disappears. At first, they may feel relief, no difficult conversations, no accountability, no need to explain themselves, no reminders of promises they failed to keep. The burden seems gone, the consequences seem non-existent, and for a brief moment, they convince themselves they made the right choice. But life has a peculiar way of revealing truth slowly. Days pass, weeks pass, months pass, and then something unexpected happens. The silence begins speaking. They reach for their phone. No message. They achieve something important. No one celebrates the way you used to. They face a difficult day. No familiar presence appears to steady them. And suddenly, what once felt ordinary begins to feel irreplaceable. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote that we should constantly remind ourselves of the temporary nature of everything we love. Not because life is cruel, but because awareness creates appreciation. Most people do the opposite. They act as though valuable people are permanent fixtures in their lives, until reality proves otherwise. The painful truth is that many people only recognize emotional security after it disappears. They discover too late that your presence was doing work they never noticed. You were calming storms they never saw, absorbing tensions they never acknowledged, providing comfort they never thanked you for, offering loyalty they assumed was automatic. Like the foundation beneath a house, your contribution remained invisible because it was functioning perfectly. And foundations are rarely appreciated until cracks begin appearing. Then comes the realization. Not all at once, but in fragments. A memory here, a regret there. A random moment when your absence suddenly feels heavier than your presence ever did. Perhaps they hear a song, visit a familiar place, see someone who reminds them of you, and for a brief second, they are confronted by a truth they spent months avoiding. You weren't difficult to replace. You were impossible to replace. Because people often misunderstand what makes someone valuable. It's not perfection, it's uniqueness. Nobody else laughed exactly like you. Nobody else understood them exactly the way you did. Nobody else carried your experiences, your perspective, your loyalty, your heart. And when you left, those things left too. This is where consequences become unavoidable. Not because karma is hunting them, not because the universe is punishing them, but because reality eventually collects every unpaid debt, and appreciation delayed often transforms into regret. The silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, they finally see what they once took for granted. But here's the tragedy. Awareness often arrives after opportunity has already left. The door they assumed would remain open forever may no longer be open. The conversation they thought could happen anytime may never happen again. The person they expected to wait indefinitely may have finally chosen themselves, and that realization carries a weight no apology can easily remove. Because some lessons can only be learned through loss, and some silences teach more than 1,000 words ever could. The consequences are no longer coming. They are already here. Part 3. When regret becomes a permanent companion. They're the ones that show up years later when there's nothing left that can be changed. Regret is unlike any other emotion. Anger burns quickly. Sadness eventually softens. Even heartbreak slowly learns how to breathe again. But regret lingers. It sits quietly in the corners of a person's life, waiting for moments of silence, waiting for late nights, waiting for birthdays, anniversaries, familiar songs, and unexpected memories. And when it arrives, it doesn't shout, it whispers, it asks a simple question. What if? What if they had listened more carefully? What if they had appreciated you while you were still there? What if they had chosen humility instead of pride? What if they had fought for the relationship instead of assuming it would survive on its own? The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once suggested that life can only be understood backward, but it must be lived forward. And that's what makes regret so powerful. Human beings rarely see the full meaning of their choices in the moment. We understand them later, when the consequences have already unfolded, when the story can no longer be rewritten. Imagine a gardener who neglects a rare tree. Day after day, they postpone watering it. Day after day, they assume there will be time tomorrow. The leaves begin to fade, the branches weaken. But because the decline is gradual, they don't panic, until one day the tree is gone. And suddenly all the water in the world becomes useless, because timing matters. Love has timing, trust has timing, opportunity has timing, and so does appreciation. Many people don't lose meaningful relationships because they intended to destroy them. They lose them because they believed they had more time. More time to apologize, more time to improve, more time to become better, more time to show gratitude. But time is one of life's greatest illusions. We assume it is abundant until it proves otherwise. This is why regret often becomes a permanent companion. Not because mistakes were made. Everyone makes mistakes. Not because flaws existed. Every human being is flawed. Regret becomes permanent when someone realizes they had the chance to do better and chose not to. Because deep down, that's the hardest truth to face. Not that life was unfair, not that circumstances were impossible, but that a different choice was available, and they didn't take it. Years later, they may meet countless people, new friendships, new relationships, new experiences, yet something remains unresolved. Because replacements can fill space, they cannot erase significance. A new chapter does not delete the previous one, and some people leave fingerprints on our lives that never completely disappear. Carl Jung believed that what we refuse to confront eventually returns to us in another form. Regret works the same way. Ignored today, returned tomorrow, suppressed in daylight, awakened at midnight. The memories keep resurfacing because the lesson remains unfinished. Because somewhere inside them, they know the truth. You weren't merely someone they met. You were a chance to grow, a chance to love correctly, a chance to become a better version of themselves. And when that chance disappeared, the loss became larger than the relationship itself. They didn't just lose a person, they lost a possibility, a future that could have existed, a story that could have been written differently. And few consequences are heavier than living with the knowledge that your greatest loss was created by your own choices. That is the burden regret carries, not the pain of what happened, but the pain of knowing it didn't have to happen. Part 4. The lesson they learned too late, and why your departure was necessary. Sometimes it's leaving, and the lesson they needed could never have been taught while you were still there. This is the part of the story most people misunderstand. They assume consequences are about revenge. They imagine that the universe keeps score, waiting for the perfect moment to punish those who made the wrong choice. But life is often more sophisticated than that. The deepest consequences are not punishments, they are revelations. The moment when reality finally strips away illusion. The moment when someone sees the truth they spent years avoiding. Because while you were present, they had a safety net. Your forgiveness protected them from the full weight of their actions. Your patience softened the impact of their behavior. Your loyalty shielded them from consequences they should have faced much earlier. In a strange way, your presence delayed their lesson, and your absence delivered it. Lao Tzu wrote that when the student is ready, the lesson appears. But sometimes people become ready only after loss forces them to pay attention, only after comfort disappears, only after certainty collapses, only after the person they underestimated is no longer available. Think about fire. Gold enters a furnace looking ordinary, but pressure reveals what was hidden. Loss works the same way. When someone loses a genuinely valuable person, they are forced into a confrontation with themselves. No distractions, no excuses, no one left to blame, only reflection, only truth. And sometimes the truth is devastating, the truth that they were loved more deeply than they realized, the truth that they received loyalty they never earned, the truth that they damaged something rare because they assumed rarity was common. That realization changes people. Not always immediately, not always visibly, but permanently, because some lessons carve themselves into the soul, and once learned, they cannot be forgotten. Years later, they may treat others differently because of what happened with you. They may become more grateful, more attentive, more respectful, more careful with people's hearts. Ironically, the wisdom they eventually gain often comes from the very loss they tried to avoid feeling. Your departure becomes the teacher. Your absence becomes the message. And whether they admit it or not, a part of them carries that lesson forever. But this story is not truly about them. It's about you. Because while they were learning consequences, you were learning something equally important. You were learning that your worth does not decrease because someone failed to recognize it. A diamond remains valuable in the hands of someone who mistakes it for a stone. The mistake belongs to the observer, not the diamond. For too long, many people tie their value to another person's appreciation. If they are loved, they feel worthy. If they are ignored, they feel insignificant. If they are abandoned, they question themselves. But wisdom begins when you understand a simple truth. Someone's inability to recognize your value is not evidence that you lack value. It is evidence that they lacked vision. And once that realization arrives, healing begins. Not because the past changes, not because the pain disappears overnight, but because you stop carrying responsibility for choices that were never yours. They made a choice. They underestimated your importance. They ignored your worth. They assumed your presence was permanent. And eventually they experienced the consequences of that belief. But your responsibility was never to stay where you were not appreciated. Your responsibility was to honor your own value, to protect your own peace, to continue moving forward. And perhaps that is the final lesson hidden within this entire story. Some people enter your life to love you, some enter to teach you, and some teach you by losing you. So if you're listening to this tonight, while wondering whether they ever understood what they lost, perhaps that's the wrong question. The better question is, have you finally understood what they lost? Because the moment you recognize your own worth, the story changes. You stop seeing yourself as the person who was left behind and begin seeing yourself as the person who walked away from a place where your value was invisible. And that realization is powerful, because when someone makes a choice that costs them a rare soul, the greatest consequence isn't what happens to you, it's what they must live with afterward. The memory of what they had, the knowledge of what they lost, and the understanding that some opportunities come only once in a lifetime. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment below with one word: realized. Because sometimes the end of a relationship isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's the beginning of self-respect. And sometimes the people who underestimated your value become the very reason you finally discover it for yourself. Thank you for watching. And remember, they didn't just lose you, they made a choice. And every choice eventually reveals its consequences.